Programming for Downstream made possible by Visit Lex, Lawrenceburg-Anderson County Tourism, Bardstown, Kentucky Tourism, Georgetown, Scott County Tourism, Bowling Green, Kentucky Tourism, and Four Roses Bourbon. Thank you for your support.
Did you know Kentucky has more navigable miles of water than any other state in the U.S. except Alaska?
Is Alaska still a state?
Includes 90,000 miles of streams and dozens of rivers.
It's also quite famous for some other liquids, those which flow from a barrel, that being beers, bourbons, and wine.
Many of the world's best-known distilleries can be found right here in the Bluegrass State, and interestingly enough, pretty darn close to many of our lakes, rivers, and streams.
We're here to take you on an expedition of the secrets and histories of our intricate waterways while visiting Kentucky's distilleries, breweries, and wineries.
I'm Carrie.
And I'm Kyle. And we're two Kentuckians who are pretty proud of our state and want to share a sip of what the Commonwealth has to offer. Miss Carrie?
Shaken, but not stirred.
Well, it's not a martini. What is it?
This is a Bloody Mary with Bloody Mary mix from Rick's White Light Diner here in Frankfort and some Castle and Key vodka.
Did you like my big, fast yellow boat? I got to ride a boat this time.
You did.
Speaking of which, where's your little...
Well, I'm not going to be piloting any vessels today after drinking this. Mine's dry docked. Instead, I think I'm going to hitch a ride on a couple of different boats today. I'm going to check out Kentucky State University's Kentucky River Thoroughbred. And then I think I'm going to try the bourbon boat.
The bourbon boat?
Yeah.
It's like I got messed up on my schedule somehow. You know what? I've had enough boating for the day. So while you're out doing that, I'm going to check out Buffalo Trace. Then I'm going to go to the castle and the key. Did you know that in Frankfort, Kentucky, you can go to a castle and Pompeii all on the same day?
That sounds pretty awesome. I say we go for it.
We will. Oh, wait a minute. You know, Captain Paul gave me a riddle.
Oh, another one of these?
Yeah, you know how much I love these riddles. So we've got this challenge to figure out today. In Kentucky, not every ball goes in a basket, and not every liquid resides in a bottle. In 1919, a magical pairing occurred in Frankfort, and your mouth will never be the same.
You know, Kyle, I think I got this one.
Oh, you did, huh?
Yeah.
Good luck with that. You know what? There's a great place downtown, Bourbon on Main. I think it's on Main Street. We should probably go check that out at the end of the day, and let's see who does win.
I'll drink to the challenge.
Fantastic. I'm out of here.
We're here today in Frankfort on the Kentucky State University's Kentucky River Thoroughbred, and we're going to talk to Ed Wilcox about taking a public education cruise.
So the Thoroughbred, the Kentucky River Thoroughbred, is Kentucky State University's educational classroom and laboratory, and it's open to the public. We invite anybody to come on board, and it's just a great opportunity. We try to get people to understand their connections to the waterways around them. So the singing bridge that's right to our front here, which people may be hearing that the vehicles are going over.
Is that why you call it the singing bridge, is because when cars go off it? Okay.
Right, the flood of the winter of 78, 79. The center of the bridge was just out of the water, whereas the ends of the bridge were under the water.
Oh, cool.
That's how much water was here.
Will you tell me a little bit about what you tell your students and your visitors?
Sure. So our flagship program for the public is a history tour, and it focuses on the river. So we'll start like 450 million years ago and talk about how this wasn't even a river back then, but then just work our way up through history to talk about how the river got to be the way it is now. And then along the way, I try to address people's concerns over the condition of the river.
So you get a lot of tourists who come on your boat. How is your program different when you're teaching a school than when folks come on a weekend for a tour?
For school groups, if they're older learners, I'll talk about the water quality, and they'll get to sample the river. So that we'll pull out water samples, do some tests, and then compare our test results to the state water quality standards. And that's also a way that I get to challenge the way they feel about the river, because if they don't have a high opinion of it, then this is data right in front of them saying, well, you know, it's not quite what you thought.
Ed, I do have this riddle that I'm supposed to solve today that I thought maybe you might be able to help me with. It's something about balls and 1919 in a magical pairing.
So 1919, I'm just not too sure about that.
Oh, well, thank you. I guess I'll have to ask later today. Have fun on your cruises.
Certainly. Thank you.
All right, we are here at Buffalo Trace, a National Historic Landmark in Frankfort, Kentucky, on the Kentucky River. We're gonna go learn about some really unique history, 18 brands of bourbon. Let's go check it out.
Hey, Kyle.
Bob, how's it going, man?
Good. Nice suit you got there. We got a dress code here, though. You know, that's a little over the top.
Whatever, you know. What's going on in this room? They unload these and then.
Yeah, they come from the Independent Stave Company to bring their truck up over there, and they load them in here. We inspect them, see if they're okay. Some of those over there are defective ones we're going to send back, but all these pass and they're ready to go.
One of the things that I find very unique is that you all are sitting literally right on the Kentucky River over here. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
Well, you know, the Kentucky River goes from Beattyville all the way down to Carrollton. We're about 62 miles from the Ohio River at this point. So surveyors were coming down the river in 1772. Basically what they were doing is looking for a place to settle, and they found this place. The story goes is they were camping across the river up here, and buffalo came through the campsite and stowed in a couple of their canoes. Two brothers basically settled it. It was called Leestown, Virginia.
Leestown, Virginia?
Yeah, it wasn't Kentucky yet. It was Virginia. And Virginia wanted you to come in here and grow corn. If you grew corn, you could pay for your property. So people did that, and they had extra corn, so they started making liquor.
Well, that's what you do with extra corn, exactly.
Yes,
I've got a few cans in my pantry. I know they're getting old, so that's my plan. What all is produced here in Frankfort?
We make 18 different bourbons out of 3 recipes, which is kind of unusual.
18?
Yeah.
We got a lot of work to do today.
Yeah, yep.
Jeez.
So the recipes are mash bills. Mash bill number 1 is corn, rye, and barley. Mash bill number 2 is corn and more rye, a little spicier, and barley. And mash bill number 3 is corn and wheat and barley, which is Pappy Van Winkle and W. Weller.
Oh, Pappy, I've heard of that.
So out of those, we make 18 different bourbons. And that's basically about where you put them in the warehouse. How high up you put them, it makes a big difference here. On the top of the warehouse, where it gets hot and gets done quicker, that would be Benchmark and Ancient Age. Middle warehouse is Buffalo Trace because it changes temperature, goes in and out of the barrel a lot. The bottom warehouse is where it's cool and it's barometric pressure kind of pushing it through the barrels. That's going to be ones that are going to be there a longer time, 10, 15, 20 years. Pappy Van Winkle, W.L. Weller, Eagle Rare, our antique collection, which is ones that have the corn oil in it, Elmer T. Lee. Blanton's is in another warehouse, but we make that here. That's in the metal warehouse because it goes in and out a lot. And then we have Buffalo Trace. And they all have different flavors because if you put them in different parts of the warehouse, it gives them different flavors. So Kyle, you seem to be interested in history. Why don't we go down to where Colonel Taylor's place is? I think you'd be interested in that.
We better go check that out.
We should see it.
Let's go check that out.
Okay.
So Matt, here at Buffalo Trace, and we've stumbled upon what looks to be a fairly old part of the distillery with a bunch of holes in it. What exactly is going on here?
Well, this is what we refer to as Bourbon Pompeii. Now, there wasn't a volcano that covered this up, but about 60 years ago, this whole building was decommissioned and forgotten about. This was the original OFC distillery that E.H. Taylor had built in 1883. And what we have over here are the fermentation vats that he used during his time here to make his old fire copper bourbon.
Wow. So these holes around us were filled with liquid that we eventually drank and had fun with, and then they just covered it up, and you guys stumbled upon it.
Yeah, at the point that it was covered up, this building had lived its useful life to the people that were running the distillery. So they used it for storage. We decided about 5 years ago that business is going pretty well. More people want to have events here at Distillery, so we were going to turn this into 3 stories of meeting and event space. So right in front of us here, we were digging down to do some foundation work and get ready for an elevator when we literally hit a brick wall.
You did. You did literally hit a brick wall.
At Buffalo Trace Distillery, we felt it was our duty to preserve the history that we were finding. So we turned this entire floor into an archaeological dig. We put a grid out on the concrete and we excavated 1 square at a time. We'd start with a miniature backhoe, and then as we started hitting solid surfaces, men would get down in there with buckets and literally dig it out by hand until we uncovered everything that we could find.
You've got a big copper swimming pool here. Now I assume it's either going to be a hot tub for your guest or you're going to put another fermented liquid of some sort in here.
We are going to ferment mash in here the E.H. Taylor way. He had what he called a 96-hour process for fermenting mash. It's basically 4 days. So by the end of this year, we'll be fermenting mash the E.H. Taylor way again, which hasn't been done in quite some time.
You just can't beat that smell.
Absolutely not. Different every day, depending on what we're cooking, what we're drying.
Every day?
Every day.
You come here and you get a wonderful smell every day. It's bourbon on the Kentucky River, which is where we're standing now. Matt, you got this great balcony here. We got the river. I hear there's boats or something that come up here and visit you all every occasion.
Absolutely. We've been working with Canoe Kentucky for a little over 2 years now. They bring kayakers and canoers down through the lock and dam. We've got a boat ramp on the south side of our property. Sometimes they grab a lunch with us, and then we give them a nice tour and tasting, history of the distillery, and kind of tie it all in with the river.
What a great tour. Like, this has been so much fun. We got to come out, learn about Buffalo Trace. Brother, I appreciate it.
We're heading down the Kentucky River towards Lock and Dam number 4 right here in downtown Frankfort.
This is a beautiful river. I understand that you talk a lot about the history of the river on your way to the distillery?
We do, yeah. So our tours are bourbon-themed history tours. So not only are we talking about the history of bourbon here on the river, but we talk a lot about this river's impact on our city here, as well as an impact it's had on the state of Kentucky. How bourbon got founded, how the name bourbon itself even became the name for that whiskey. It was named after Bourbon County, Kentucky. And later on, barrels shipped down this river to places like New Orleans were stamped Bourbon County, Kentucky whiskey. And so folks in New Orleans thought that it was bourbon whiskey and the name stuck. So talking about that history, the history of our founders like Elijah Craig and Colonel Blanton and Colonel E.H. Taylor, who took Kentucky whiskey and turned it into the multi-billion-dollar a year industry it is today. I love teaching people about that history here on the river.
And it all started on this body of water.
It all started right here on this river. Those early whiskey distillers, all those guys that came across the Appalachian Mountains from places like originally from Scotland and Ireland, they all knew how to make whiskey, so they brought those stills over the mountains with them, and they just viewed this river here as the perfect shipping channel for moving that kind of stuff. And it all started right in this area.
Fabulous. Well, we're headed into lock number 4, right?
That's correct. We're heading into lock number 4. The 4 locks and dams downriver from us were all built in 1840. They're all still operational today. They're free of charge to go through on weekends, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And except for new doors and new hydraulics, they're exactly the same as they were in 1840 when they were built.
Wow, that's incredible.
These locks will take you all the way out to the Ohio River eventually, which is about 65 miles downriver from where we currently sit.
So they quarried these stones and hauled them down here
That's
on
right.
horses?
Some of these stones came from the Frankfort rock quarry right here in Frankfort, and some of them came from other places, and laid them in the river to create the lock that we have today. Yeah, so when you're in these historic locks, you're talking about being in something that's almost 200 years old and still functions in primarily the exact same way it always did. That's pretty fascinating, Once the lockmaster shuts the upstream doors and closes the valves on them, so each of the hydraulics, there's 3 hydraulic gates on each door, so each side, the upstream and the downstream side, have 6 gates. And he's closing those gates right now, and what that's doing is it's not allowing any water to come into the lock chamber anymore. He'll then go down to the downstream side and he'll open up those gates. So it's kind of like pulling the plug on a bathtub.
Okay.
They can pull the plug and the water's going to drain right out through those gates. He can take it down as fast or as slow as he wants to. Usually once he opens the gates, it's about 8 to 9 minutes to drop all the way down to the lower level. So if you just think of it as a 145-foot long, 36-foot wide bathtub, it makes no sense for a lot of people. That's all we're in. As kids playing in the bathtub, you pull the plug, and what was left behind was your little rubber ducky or your little boat on the floor. That's the same thing that's going to happen now. It's just going to drop out with the lock. The drop in this lock here is right around 15 feet, and close to 1 million gallons of water will drain out of here in the 8 minutes it takes to go down.
Wow.
The hillside right up above us up there to our right is the original settlement in this area. So in 1776, Hancock Lee built his community here. That's 1 year after Daniel Boone built Fort Boonesborough. So Leestown was up there at the top of the hill, and it was primarily a farming and a hunting community up there. And Buffalo Trace Distillery now sits on old Leestown property, basically. This is Kentucky's river. It's a self-contained river here in the state. All the water is Kentucky water that you're on. So it's a very important river to how our state was founded. That one looks a little scraggly. I bet that is a young one. Oh, that's so pretty.
Oh, it's beautiful. Well, Captain, you seem to know a lot about history, and I have this riddle they've given me to solve. In Kentucky, not every ball goes in a basket, and not every liquid resides in a bottle. In 1919, a magical pairing occurred in Frankfort, and your mouth will never be the same.
Well, you've got to be talking about the bourbon ball, of course.
Really?
Yeah, so, the bourbon ball invented here in Frankfort at Rebecca Ruth Candy's in 1919 is the perfect pairing of chocolate and bourbon. And the bourbon ball is the one bourbon experience we have on the bourbon boat. All of our guests do get to enjoy a Rebecca Booth bourbon ball.
I'm going to have to try one of those.
Well, you should. It's just down the street from where we finish our tour out here, and head right over there to 2nd Street and go check out Rebecca Ruth Chocolates. You can take a tour of the candy factory while you're there.
Sounds great.
Sorry, is that James Bond or Kyle?
Caroline!
Look at you.
Castle and Key, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good
How are you?
to see you.
Looking
Fantastic.
dapper.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to. This place seems like it may be kind of old. What's the history here?
It's very historic. So this is a site that was built in the late 1800s by Colonel E.H. Taylor in 1887. A massive, massive complex. It's 113 acres and has lots of different components to it. We've got a castle, we've got sunken gardens, we've got a spring house that's an iconic space on site. And Colonel Taylor built all of this to entertain guests. He was really the father of the modern bourbon tourism movement.
So 1887, has this place been cranking out bourbon ever since 1887?
It did for a while. So Colonel Taylor operated here until Prohibition happened. And it was after Prohibition that national distillers ended up purchasing this property. They were cranking out somewhere around 1,000 barrels a day, which was insane. Yeah, so that was from 1935 until 1972 they did. And so for 40 plus years, it was becoming overgrown and not kept in shape. And so it was in ruins by the time our owners found it in 2016. And so we have been able to take what he created here in the late 1800s and resurrect it.
So the grounds, there are some really neat things that the Colonel did that were unique to this particular distillery that you don't find in other places?
So I don't know of another bourbon distillery that has a castle like this. So we have a limestone castle that was built in the late 1800s. We have sunken garden that looks like and mimics the Windsor Castle grounds.
I assume that somewhere near here there is a flowing creek, river, or something where water comes from?
So we have an iconic spring house on site that Colonel Taylor actually built this spring house around it to highlight this water source. So it's an underground aquifer that fills itself up twice a day. It has 140,000 gallons of water in it, and we use that in all of our spirits: gin, vodka, rye whiskey, and bourbon.
So Caroline, you think we can maybe check out some of these wonderful things you just told me about?
Absolutely.
And maybe try some of the product that's being made from that spring?
I think we can arrange that.
Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go.
All right.
You know, Prohibition's my kryptonite.
Is that a cummerbund?
Seriously?
Nailed it.
I see 2 bottles here with some neat labels. This is the Castle & Key vodka, and it's pretty cool because it shows you the mash bill right on the front, what it's made from. Tell me a little about the vodka.
Really wanted to create a special vodka. Vodka, as defined, is a odorless, tasteless spirit, but for us, we wanted to make sure that there was still character involved in the base that we were creating. And so we used our bourbon recipe, and then we redistilled it up to 190 proof and made it that odorless, tasteless spirit.
So this is 190 proof.
Well,
that's fantastic.
we distill it up to that, and then we bring it back down to the proof that we were going to land at. 190 proof would be a little bit much in a cocktail.
That's true.
And then for any good gin, you need a really great base of vodka, and so we actually use our vodka in the creation for our gin as well.
And this is the London Dry Gin.
That's right. We've got coriander here. We've got angelica root. This is the base that you typically would find in a gin, but for us, we wanted to switch it up a little bit, and so some of the herbs and botanicals that are unique to us is the rosemary and then the ginger, and we've also got chamomile here. Next, we have lemon verbena, which brings in that citrus note, and then for mouthfeel, we have licorice root. So that's our recipe right there. So in the experience that we take our guests on, they go around the property, they get to come in here at the end of the experience after hearing all about the history of the place and the story of Castle & Key. They get to enjoy these beverages, and so we make cocktails for them.
The vodka,
Yep.
the gin,
Yep.
cocktails. Obviously there's maybe something missing here, but that's going to be ready soon.
Sure.
The darker liquid is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the brown spirits, yes. So we have our rye whiskey is going to be released in 2020, which we're incredibly excited about. And then our bourbon is going to be released in early 2022.
So folks can come in and try that as well once they're here.
That's right. But in the meantime, we have cocktails, and so wanted to share one with you.
Absolutely.
This is our classic gin and tonic with Jack Rudy classic tonic syrup. So you can smell real citrusy on the nose. You can smell a little bit of that rosemary that we garnish.
Leaf fell in mine.
So rosemary for a garnish, also a lemon peel, and then a couple of juniper berries as well. So this is a really crisp, refreshing, classic gin and tonic, and it's great for the summertime and can transition into fall.
The taste.
Yeah.
I've made it to Rebecca Ruth's, and I'm gonna go inside and try some of these bourbon balls, and I think I solved the riddle. Come on, let's see if they'll give us a tour and see how they're made.
My name is Charles Boog. I am the third generation owner of Rebecca Ruth Candies. Well, Rebecca Ruth is world famous because my grandmother invented the bourbon ball in 1936. She started her business in 1919. That's right, we've been in business for a full century. All right, my grandmother was Ruth and her friend was Rebecca, so the name actually comes from two different ladies, and they used their first names to start the business, as the tradition of the day would have been a paternal style of using, say, Smith and Sons. However, they use their first names, which is maternal style. They started in 1919. They'd previously been substitute school teachers and decided to go into the candy business because they had made candies for Christmas gifts, and they were very famous for that. Well, I think that the quality that my grandmother always insisted on, she was noted as having perfect taste buds, so we were always very conscious of the quality of the ingredients that go into our chocolates, and we've really had to work hard to maintain that quality. We have been here since the 1960s, and it was the first property that my grandmother ever bought. The candy making process starts with the cacao bean. You take the cacao bean and you ferment it and then roast it, and then you grind it down into a liquid, and then it ready to flow onto the chocolate, onto the candy as a couverture, and all of that takes a great deal of work. To get the chocolate just right is an art. So many of our processes are all done by hand, from putting the pecan on by hand to packing the candy. There's just so much that goes into it. Chocolates and candy are almost all hand labor. Well, the things that are super special about Rebecca Ruth Candies is the candy. We think inside the box. So the taste has to come out.
I've got them. I can't wait to tell Kyle that I've solved the riddle. Let's go.
Elderflowers. What's this big sack of balls?
Those are bourbon balls. They are Rebecca Ruth bourbon balls, founded in 1919. I solved it this time, Kyle.
It appears you did. How did you manage to do that while you're out there exploring the waterways?
After I took a ride on the Thoroughbred, I went and saw Captain Nathan on the bourbon boat. And he told me to head over to Rebecca Ruth. Learned all about how those are made and even got to taste a few.
Well, while you were mixing chocolate and sugar and such with your bourbon, I was having it straight up at Buffalo Trace. They've uncovered bourbon making history.
Ooh.
And then the castle had vodka, gin, and they're working on a really tasty rye and bourbon that'll be ready in a few years. I may not have solved the riddle, but I feel really good. Speaking of which, I got you a drink, because we are at Bomb Bourbon on Main.
Oh.
You have a Bomb Old Fashioned, and I have a Main Street Manhattan.
They look great, Kyle.
I think they probably will be. You know what? Until next time.
We'll see you downstream.